The battlefield orbiting the dead world was silent, covered in dust and ruins of machines that once roared with war. Smoke still curled through the cracks of broken metal, and the air carried a faint echo of something ancient. The Galactic Alliance. Soldiers moved carefully among the wreckage, their scanners sweeping for life signals. No one expected to find anything, not after decades of destruction. But then the ground shook. A deep, guttural sound rolled through the silence, making even the bravest flinch. Out from the shadows came a creature that should have been long dead, a Vrakor war beast. It was enormous, taller than a tank, its body a fusion of flesh and machinery. Jagged scars ran down its back where armor had fused into skin, and one of its eyes glowed like molten metal. It breathed heavily, each exhale vibrating the air like thunder. Even chained by glowing energy restraints, it looked unstoppable. The soldiers froze, hearts racing. None of them wanted to go near it. They had grown up hearing stories about these beasts, creatures built for war, programmed only to kill. Many of their ancestors had died fighting its kind. Seeing one alive was like staring at a ghost from humanity's worst nightmares. The commanding officer barked orders to secure it, but no one volunteered. It took 3 drones and 2 mech suits just to hold the creature down. It snarled, its teeth clanging against metal restraints. The soldiers whispered among themselves, calling it names: monster, abomination, killer. Some said they should destroy it before it broke free. But among them stood one man, quiet and thoughtful, Captain Elias Ward. He watched as the beast struggled, not with fear, but with something closer to sorrow. Where others saw rage, he noticed exhaustion. Where they saw hatred, he saw pain. The creature's breathing was heavy, uneven, as if every inhale was a fight against its own survival. That night, the camp around the captured beast was restless. Soldiers stayed far from the containment field, afraid that one wrong move would trigger its wrath. But Elias didn't sleep. He stood near the edge of the barrier, watching. The beast's single glowing eye tracked him, unblinking. For a long moment, neither moved. The air between them felt heavy, filled with the weight of history and fear. Elias finally spoke, his voice low. "You've seen too many wars, haven't you?" Of course, the creature couldn't answer, but it tilted its head slightly, a movement that almost felt human. When dawn came, the reports went out across the network. Vrakor war beast recovered, awaiting orders for termination. The soldiers celebrated, thinking they had captured a trophy of victory. But Elias stayed silent, staring at the message. Something about killing it felt wrong. As he walked past its containment cell again, he noticed how it barely moved now, its body shaking, its breathing slower. It wasn't just a weapon anymore, it was dying. A young recruit approached him nervously and said, "Sir, are we really going to keep that thing alive?" Elias looked through the glass barrier at the creature, then turned back to the soldier. "It's still alive?" he said simply. "That's reason enough." The recruit frowned, confused. To him, compassion didn't belong in war. But Elias had seen too many lifeless eyes to know that even monsters could bleed. That evening, he returned once more, standing quietly in the cold glow of the energy field. The war beast raised its head slightly, its gaze locking with his. Its eyes, one mechanical, one organic, held no rage now, only something that looked hauntingly like recognition. Elias didn't move closer, didn't speak again. He just stood there until the stars began to rise over the broken planet. In the silence between them, something unspoken passed. Not peace, not trust, but understanding. The others saw only a demon locked in a cage. Elias saw a soul trapped inside a machine built for destruction, forgotten by those who made it. For the first time since the war ended, he wondered if humanity's greatest victory had come at the cost of its own compassion. And as the night deepened, the creature's breathing slowed, calm for the first time in years, as if it somehow knew that for once, it wasn't being looked at with fear. It was being seen. The order came in at dawn, cold, clear, and final. The Galactic Alliance had decided the Vrakor war beast was too dangerous to be kept alive. Commanders didn't want to risk it breaking free or becoming a symbol of fear again. Termination was to be immediate. Soldiers gathered around the containment field, their faces tense, weapons ready. But one man didn't move. Captain Elias Ward stood at the edge of the observation deck, watching the creature through the shimmering energy barrier. Its breathing was slower now, not from calm, but from exhaustion. It wasn't snarling or roaring anymore. It was just lying there, eyes half open, as if it had finally given up. The beast that had once terrified entire worlds now looked tired, almost defeated. While the others argued about the safest way to carry out the order, Elias said nothing. His gaze lingered on the creature's eyes. Once, they must have burned like fire, filled with fury and survival instinct. Now they looked clouded, heavy, worn by centuries of war and solitude. He couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just an animal. It had memories, pain, maybe even guilt. Every scar on its body told a story no one cared to listen to. He didn't see a weapon anymore. He saw a prisoner who didn't know why it was still alive. Against orders, Elias began visiting the containment site alone. At first it was curiosity. Then it became something deeper, an unspoken need to understand. Each time he came, he made small adjustments, lowering the heat field so the creature could breathe easier, bringing water, ensuring the food rations were placed gently through the supply chute instead of thrown like garbage. He never spoke loudly, never made sudden moves. Instead, he talked softly through the static barrier, not to tame it, but to let it know someone was listening. The first few times, the creature ignored him. It stayed motionless, its glowing eye following him with suspicion. But as days passed, something changed. The growls that used to rumble in its chest became less frequent. Its claws no longer scraped the floor when he approached. One evening, when Elias placed a container of purified water near the field, the creature didn't hiss. It slowly reached out, lifted the bowl with its metallic hand, and drank. The soldiers watching the security feed couldn't believe what they saw. Whispers spread through the base like wildfire. "The human is trying to tame the beast," they said, half joking, half afraid. Some mocked him outright. Others warned him that he was putting the whole station at risk. "It's not a pet," one officer snapped. "You're wasting time on something that would kill you the second it's free." Elias didn't respond. He'd learned long ago that understanding always looked like weakness to those who were afraid. The next morning, when the commander demanded confirmation that the termination protocol had been executed, Elias lied. "The process is under review," he said calmly. In truth, he had delayed it himself, locking out the kill authorization with his personal clearance code. He was risking his rank, maybe even his freedom, but he didn't care. He couldn't bring himself to destroy something that had already been destroyed inside. Later that night, Elias stood once more by the containment field. The creature's eye met his through the haze. "You don't belong in a cage," he said softly, though he knew it couldn't understand his words. Still, something in the creature's expression shifted. For the first time, it didn't look at him as a threat. It looked at him as if it recognized something familiar. Pain, perhaps, or the longing to be free. The rumor spread far beyond the camp. Commanders called him reckless. Soldiers whispered that he had lost his mind. But what they didn't see was that the beast's rage had quieted. Its energy levels had stabilized. It no longer tried to break free or destroy. It simply existed. Peacefully. Elias continued his silent visits, even as pressure from the higher-ups grew. Every time he saw the creature, he felt a strange calm wash over him. as if both of them had finally found someone who understood what it meant to be alone after the war. The universe had spent centuries creating weapons and calling it progress. But in that quiet, dimly lit cell, a human and a monster found something no one expected. Not victory, not defeat, but understanding. By the end of that week, Elias knew one truth he could never unlearn. Sometimes the bravest thing a soldier can do isn't to pull the trigger. It's to refuse to. The night started like any other, quiet, still, and heavy, with the low hum of the facility's reactors deep beneath the planet's surface. Elias had stayed late again, reviewing data near the observation deck. The war beast rested behind its containment field, its breathing slow and steady, the light from the energy barrier reflecting faintly off its scarred metallic skin. For days now, the base had been stable, calm even, but that calm shattered in an instant. A sudden tremor shook the walls. Then a blinding flash of red emergency lights filled the corridors, and alarms screamed across every speaker. "Reactor breach in Sector 6!" the announcement blared. Panic spread like fire through the outpost. Elias rushed toward the control panel, trying to access the systems, but half the screens had gone dark. The explosion had damaged the main power grid, and one by one, sections of the facility began losing power. He felt the ground vibrate under his boots as soldiers shouted orders and scrambled to contain the damage. But deep inside, he knew exactly what this meant. The energy field holding the war beast wouldn't last much longer. And then, with a loud pop and a surge of static, it vanished. The bright blue barrier that had confined the creature flickered once and then disappeared completely. For the first time since its capture, the Vrakor war beast was free. Soldiers screamed and raised their weapons. "Target loose! Open fire!" someone yelled, but Elias shouted over them, "Hold your fire!" The creature stood in the shadows of its cell, its glowing eye cutting through the thick smoke. It didn't move to attack. It didn't roar. It just stood there, breathing hard, staring directly at Elias. Elias's heart raced, but not from fear. He didn't feel threatened. Instead, he felt something deeper, a strange connection he couldn't explain. He took a step forward, then another, ignoring the shouts behind him. The soldiers aimed their rifles, terrified. The creature's massive frame filled the room, its claws scraping lightly against the floor, yet it remained still, waiting. The air between them felt charged, alive with tension. Every second stretched into forever. Through the haze and firelight, Elias could see it clearly now. The same eyes that had once terrified entire armies were not wild or angry. They were calm, curious even. "It's okay," Elias said quietly, his voice steady. "You're not my enemy." His words were almost lost in the chaos, but somehow the creature seemed to hear him. It let out a low rumble, not of aggression, but something like recognition. Then, with slow, deliberate movement, it lowered its head toward him. Every soldier froze, disbelief painted across their faces. Elias extended his hand, his palm open. His heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his chest, but he didn't stop. His fingertips touched the creature's skin, cold metal mixed with rough scales. It was like touching something ancient and sacred. For a brief, unexplainable moment, the world seemed to stop. The alarms, the shouting, the smoke, everything faded away. It was just a human and a creature from another age, standing face to face. The beast exhaled slowly, its breath warm and heavy, washing over him. It closed its eye halfway, lowering its head further, almost in submission. Around them, the soldiers couldn't believe what they were seeing. The same being that had once destroyed entire cities now stood still, bowing before a human who had done nothing but show it compassion. Elias didn't speak. He didn't move. He just kept his hand there, feeling the faint pulse beneath the creature's skin, proof that despite everything it was alive, truly alive. The beast gave a deep, low sound that almost resembled a sigh. It was the sound of release, of something broken beginning to heal. When power was finally restored and the lights came back on, the containment field reactivated, shimmering back into place. But by then, the soldiers didn't rush forward. They didn't shoot or shout. They only watched in silence as the creature stepped back behind the barrier willingly, its gaze never leaving Elias. Later, when the reports were written and the incident logs filed, the others tried to make sense of what they had seen. Some said the beast recognized Elias as its master. Others said it had been too weak to fight. But deep down, everyone who had been there knew the truth. It hadn't been fear that stopped the creature. It had been trust. That night, as the facility returned to a fragile calm, Elias sat outside the containment room, staring at the creature through the glass. The war beast watched him back, quiet and still. Between them, words were no longer needed. In a galaxy that had learned to destroy what it didn't understand, a single moment of kindness had done what weapons never could. It had built a bridge. And in that fragile, glowing silence, humanity proved once again that its greatest strength wasn't power. It was compassion. When the smoke cleared and calm returned to the base, Elias began digging through the data files recovered from the wreckage. He needed answers, not just about what the creature was, but why it existed at all. For hours he sat in front of the dim screen, scrolling through fragments of Vrakor code and ancient records pulled from the ship's archives. Then he found it, a file marked with a single symbol, the same insignia carved into the creature's armor. He opened it, and what he read made his stomach tighten. The war beast wasn't born. It was made. It wasn't a creature of nature, but a creation of desperation, engineered centuries ago by the Vrakor during their final war, built to destroy enemies they no longer even remembered. The records described it in cold, scientific terms. A weapon of instinct, designed to obey, incapable of choice. But something didn't fit. The creature Elias had seen wasn't mindless. It had made a choice, to spare lives when it could have easily ended them. That wasn't programming. That was will. Elias leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes. The galaxy had spent centuries calling the Vrakor beasts monsters, and this creature had become the symbol of that hatred. Yet now he realized it was a victim, not a villain. When he brought his findings to the Alliance Command Council, they dismissed him immediately. "You're letting your emotions interfere with your judgment," one official said sharply. "That thing was built to kill. It's a threat to every living being in this sector." Elias tried to argue, showing them the data, the genetic sequencing, the logs, all pointing to the same truth. But they didn't care. "Orders stand," another replied coldly. "Terminate the specimen." The call ended with a sharp beep, leaving Elias staring at the black screen, his reflection ghostly in the glass. He walked back to the containment chamber, the weight of failure heavy in his chest. The creature stirred as he entered, its single eye following him. "They don't understand," he said quietly, leaning against the reinforced glass. "You were made for war, but that doesn't mean you are war." The creature blinked slowly, and Elias wondered if somewhere behind that engineered mind, it knew exactly what he meant. Word of his confrontation with command spread quickly through the base. Some soldiers called him reckless, but others began to see what he saw. They'd all witnessed the same thing, how in the moment of chaos, the beast hadn't attacked. It had protected. It could have crushed them all, but it didn't. It had chosen peace over destruction. Slowly, one by one, those who had mocked Elias before began to question their own fear. Maybe he wasn't crazy after all. Maybe kindness really did change things. That evening, several soldiers joined him by the containment field. They brought small offerings, food, scraps of metal, anything to show goodwill. The creature didn't snarl. It didn't lunge. It simply watched, calm and still. One young soldier whispered, Sir, it looks sad. Elias nodded. It's been fighting a war it never asked for. Those words hung heavy in the air, striking a chord in everyone there. When the next command came to initiate the termination sequence, something remarkable happened. No one moved. The officers hesitated, looking at Elias. For the first time, defiance spread not from rebellion, but from conscience. "If this is a monster," one of them said softly, "then maybe we all are." Elias looked around, his chest tightening with emotion. These were soldiers who had lost friends, who had seen death and fear. And yet now they were standing for mercy. He turned back to the creature, its glowing eye reflecting his own. In that quiet moment, the line between man and beast seemed to blur. "You're not our enemy anymore," he said, his voice steady. The creature tilted its head slightly, almost as if it understood. It took a slow breath, a sound that echoed through the chamber like wind through old ruins. By dawn, the official termination had been delayed again, the report rewritten to say, "Further observation required." The higher-ups would protest, of course, but Elias didn't care. Something far greater had happened that night. A group of hardened soldiers had learned that compassion was not weakness. It was power. The kind of power that could stop wars not by force, but by understanding. The creature, once feared as a monster, now rested quietly, no longer straining against its chains. It wasn't a weapon anymore. It was living proof that peace could be found even in the heart of something made for war. And for Elias, that was enough reason to fight, not against the creature, but for it. The morning the ship departed was quiet, the kind of silence that carried both sorrow and hope. The containment field was gone now, and in its place stood the Vrakor war beast, unchained for the first time in centuries. Its massive form shimmered under the soft light of the alien sun. The air was still, thick with the emotion of everyone who had gathered to witness what no one had thought possible. After months of debate, reports, and defiance, the Galactic Alliance had finally agreed to Elias's proposal, to release the creature, not as a prisoner or weapon, but as a living being deserving of peace. The landing zone was surrounded by guards, though none of them raised their weapons. They all knew this was not an execution. It was an ending and a beginning. Elias stood closest to the creature, his hands behind his back, his uniform dusty and worn. He looked up at it with a mix of pride and sadness. This was the day he had fought for, but it also meant saying goodbye to something, someone who had taught him more about humanity than most humans ever could. The shuttle doors opened with a slow hiss, revealing the lush sanctuary world beyond, a planet filled with glowing forests, endless plains and soft rivers that pulsed with bioluminescent light. It was a world untouched by war, chosen specifically because no sentient species lived there. The creature stepped forward slowly, its heavy feet pressing into the soft ground. Each movement was deliberate, almost hesitant, as if it still couldn't believe it was free. Elias followed it to the edge of the ramp, where the artificial light met the wild, living glow of the forest. For a long moment, neither spoke. The soldiers stood behind them, silent, watching history unfold. The creature turned slightly, its single eye focused on him. The faint hum of its cybernetic systems filled the air, and then, for the first time, it spoke in a voice that was deep, rough, and metallic, but unmistakably filled with emotion. "Thank you." The words came slowly, uncertainly, like something it had never been allowed to say before. The sound of them rolled through the clearing, low and powerful, echoing across the valley. Elias's throat tightened. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. Instead, he simply smiled, the kind of quiet smile that spoke of respect, relief, and an understanding that went beyond language. He gave a small nod, the gesture of one soldier to another, not as master to servant, but as equals. The creature lingered for a moment longer, its gaze holding his, before it turned toward the glowing horizon. With a deep, almost peaceful growl, it began walking into the forest. The light from its mechanical armor reflected off the trees, merging with the natural glow until it disappeared entirely into the wilderness. The silence that followed was heavy, but not empty. It was filled with something new. Hope. As the shuttle lifted off, the soldiers who had once feared the creature stood still, watching in awe. No one spoke for several minutes. Then one of them finally said, "Sir, do you think it'll survive out there?" Elias glanced out the window, his eyes following the faint trail of light where the creature had gone. "It's not about survival anymore," he said softly. "It's about finally being free." The story of what happened that day didn't stay secret for long. Within weeks, it spread across the galaxy, carried by reporters, traders, and travelers. People spoke of it not as a military operation, but as a miracle. They called it the Compassion Accord, a moment that changed everything. For centuries, the galaxy had built walls between species, defining worth by fear and strength. But now they had proof that even the fiercest beings, even those made for war, could feel something greater: kindness. Elias became a symbol, though he never sought fame. He often said, "It wasn't me who changed anything. It was us, all of us who chose to see a soul instead of a weapon." And long after he was gone, his story lived on, across countless worlds. Murals were painted, a human standing beside a towering creature, not as enemies, but as allies. Children in schools learned about the day when compassion triumphed over fear. And in the deep forests of that distant sanctuary planet, travelers sometimes swore they could still hear it, a low, peaceful rumble that echoed through the trees, as if the war beast was watching over its new world. It was no longer a monster. It was a reminder that even in the darkest corners of the universe, empathy could light the way.